internet addicts all download porn. And I think it's very important, those of you who are parents out there, that you close the gap so you know exactly what your family members are doing online. I tell all my clients that they should have their computers in an open, accessible place in the home, so there's no secrets kept in them. So I really do think that we have a responsibility as parents to do that.
That story I told earlier about the young woman who, was BitTorrenting all this stuff, and so that her profiles that appeared in the Toronto Star without her name attached has, of course, made it back into her family, which was the occasion for a family weekend discussion, both with her parents and with her various aunts and uncles and her cousins about their behavior. And I think it apparently turned out to be a bit of a wake-up call for the parents. And I was thanked, which I thought was very kind of them, because you might have felt that you'd have preferred your child had not. She's 18, so she should be knowing what she's doing, but anyway, their feeling was this was great, that had been brought to their attention what their daughter was doing, and this was an occasion for a family discussion. And prior to this article appearing, one thing her aunt had told me about it was that her brother, who's only 8 years younger, doesn't do any of these things, and he doesn't do them because he says they're wrong, and he said to his sister that he thinks they're wrong. And their aunt observes this is simply a personality difference between the two of them. That one of them is someone who will strike out on his own, and the other is someone who tends to follow the crowd. And that's really what it kind of came down to, not really a generational thing.
Hello. Going back to that little contest with the question, I'm going to have a smart-ass question. I'm just actually going to read the question on the poster because I don't feel it's really been dealt with yet. So is digital technology really helping us to stay informed? And just on that, I just want to add my little point of view. I'd see information overload as a symptom, and maybe see what you guys think. And we have information overload. I call it personally information obesity. Information is food for thought. And right now, I think there are a lot of fast food for thought and a lot of information obesity. And just a few points. It's quality versus quantity, the old debate. And just to put it in perspective, I think we're in the midst of the digital revolution, obviously, and we had the agricultural revolution that changed the society and the way we did it. We had the industrial revolution, which completely changed from agricultural life to urban, to factories, and I think now we're in this midst of change, and we don't really understand what's going on because we've got our face in the windshield. And then a couple of more observations also of that: bread and circuses, and you're at the Ted Rogers faculty. Rogers and Dale, they're controlling a lot of that access to information and brainwashing a lot of people in a sense, and in terms of policy making and elections and voting. And then finally, the whole Gutenberg printing press, the Bible translated, the reform, again, major social changes happening, and then finally the whole growth of yoga and meditation, and the whole idea of being in the now. Because I think all this digital technology is really pulling us outside of us. And I think, to me, it's kind of as information overload as a symptom of a big transition we're going through. This growth of yoga, beyond the little lemon yoga butt, blah, 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 blah. I think there's a deep need for people to try to get grounded and understand what's going on around us. So, information overload as a symptom of what? Or do you agree or do you disagree?
I don't think we had an objective to answer the question. It's a little let's just circle around it.
You're a guest now.
I think my personal take on it is, and I think I would say I don't want to verify technology. I think that we're talking about practices, information practices, the way people use and access and make sense and share information. And that maybe has changed from generation or from people's context. But you know what? I don't think technology this is the one to be verified. Whether it's helping us to stay informed, you know what? Yes, it is. Because we have access to technology
that we didn't have even 20 years ago. You are in the middle of dinner because you are expecting 20 people and you need a recipe for something. How did you used to do it before the internet? Seriously, like how would you find information when you need it? Just in time. This is a specific example, but other than sex, the other major information category that people search for on the internet is health information. And for we all have, people, relatives, friends who have health conditions, and the ability to just at least be able to access health information is huge. It doesn't mean that all of it is going to be useful, that you'll be able to process it and understand it, because most of the time it comes from scholarly articles and you don't even know what the hell you're talking about. But we also know that for health information, a lot of the time the usefulness comes from sharing, from hearing other people's stories, and just the sense of not being alone with cancer, but having a community of people just going to be able to go through the same thing. I'm pregnant and I'm always on the internet because, you want to find a community of people who go through the same thing. Anyway, so I think that technology does help us stay more informed. If used properly, it's a fantastic tool. I mean, if you can keep track of the apps that get released, they do some amazing things, like geospatial services. I mean, there's a lot of really, really interesting things going around. But I just think that, the concept of literacy, like what you do with the technology and how much time you're able to spend on it. And my daughter is 3 and she's addicted to YouTube, And I would say it's a bad thing, but you know what? I kind of have control over what kind of cartoons and what kind of content she accesses. And as a result, it's a fantastic tool. She is learning French, she's learning Hindi, through the songs. I mean, there's a lot that you can do if well harnessed. So, not kind of redefine technology, but just kind of paying attention to practices and how it's used. So,
it's really an interesting question because there's access to information. To me, though, the word informed has a lot of connotations, and I associate it with, the notion that you need an educated population in order to have a real democracy. And if you could look at it through that lens, I'm not sure technology makes us more or less informed, but the level of political disengagement today is greater than it's ever been before. So there's, in spite of all of the promise of populism and access to democracy, etc., I think more people know what Britney Spears looks like without her panties than know what's going on, for example, in the Toronto election. And for me personally, that's a huge issue. That has nothing to do with technology one way or the other, but I do think that it's, again, something we should be concerned about. And decline of the decline of consumption of conventional media doesn't concern me at all. The decline in interest in conventional news concerns me greatly.
You made a point about sort of quality versus quantity, and one of the reason I'm here is because I'm a cultural critic, and as a cultural critic, what you do professionally is you make distinctions about content, and you make judgments on content, and I think that to me is really the issue. And whether, obviously there's a flood. There's everything we want. There's everything we don't want. And part of, I guess, what I'm looking at is, okay, in all that, in that flood, is there quality? And is there diversity? And obviously, quality is a very subjective thing, but I don't think diversity is quite so subjective. And what I saw, it is a situation, obviously, that's very much half empty, half full, as those two views just gave you. Obviously, it gives us access to all sorts of stuff instantly that we didn't have before, and yet, on the other hand, it distracts us with all sorts of stuff we don't really need. And I guess what I see is that we have certain obligation as individuals to act as informed consumers and citizens. And the word consumer is used continually now, and the government especially uses it continually. When I go to CRTC hearings, all they talk about are consumers. And I thought a lot about that, because I don't know about anybody else here, but my reaction is, as a consumer, is one of the last things I define myself as. You know, I shop at Loblaws. We have a Rogers subscription. These are not very important definitions to my personality. You know, being a woman, or being a Canadian, or being an employee of the Globe and Mail, or being a journalist. Those things are much more important to who I am. And yet, what I see is that I'm continually told that it's my behavior as a consumer that matters. And the thing about consumption is that it's very, very easy, and of course the internet has made it much more easy, and it's very easy to do things we don't actually want to do. That is, they serve our immediate needs, but they aren't really what we want to do on the larger level. And one example of that that I've thought of is that my husband and I both believe that in Toronto we don't pay enough property tax, and one of the reasons why the city is crumbling around us is because we don't pay enough property tax. And if you go and talk to people who live just in Ottawa, that's all as far as you have to go, let alone other cities in the country, you'll find out they pay a lot more property tax. And so this is sort of, I think there's this kind of myth that's got up that we're overtaxed. So anyway, the other day this thing arrived at our door saying, you know, could we phone this phone number to have our house reassessed? And of course we didn't phone the phone number because we don't really want the house reassessed because then we don't have to pay more taxes. So there's what you want on the long term, and then there's what you might do with the click of the mouse. And I think we have to talk about those issues. And I guess I saw that very much in the downloading debate. There's what we can all easily do, and then there's what we want. And we want, in the long term, we want more music, right? Well, if we all keep just downloading it for free, there won't be more music, because at a certain point, you know, they'll stop, or it'll become much harder to make a living. And I'm not sure if that's so true of music, but it's certainly, if you look at book publishing, if what happened in the music industry happened in book publishing, the choices in books would narrow instead of expanding. So I guess I see that we have obligations, not as consumers, but as citizens, to talk about these things and to recognize that that's what we're doing with our online behavior.
Just a small footnote is, I think the question should actually be, is digital technology really helping us stay engaged? Because I think the engagement is way more important than just the access to information.
Okay, we really need to finish up at 6, and we have a couple more questions on the board.
Yeah, for the lady on the side here. Studying the effect of the signals from all electronic gizmos and it overriding our own 5 electrical signals we've got going on in the brain. So if you're moving people out of that, their addiction to it, would you not have to readjust all their normal brain signals so they would come back to the normal position?
I knew I was going to get a brain question. And I'm not a neurologist, so I can't speak so much about brain activity. Though, you know, what really, in very basic levels, you know, when we've looked at addictive behavior and we've looked at dopamine levels rising, there's many things that change neurotransmitters and brain activity. Some, you know, really simple things like talk therapy can change the way people's brains work. I guess to share a quick brain example, and I go back to that, sorry, is we used to think that our arousal templates were fixed. So what we're aroused to, you know, whether it's heterosexual people or homosexual people, men, women, body parts, positions, places, things, right? We're all aroused by certain things, and we used to think it was fixed. And the internet's really changed that, because we found out that just by exposure, like constant exposure to different images, that our arousal templates have changed. I ended up getting actually one of my first clients who got into a lot of trouble with downloading pornography, and his wife, more so, was horrified at what he was downloading. But he had changed, you know, it had changed in his brain, what he was really aroused to just from the exposure. So engagement is one thing, accessibility is another, but just, you know, and that can change again, right? I mean, I think our brains, like I said, I don't like to speak so much about the brain because I'm not a neurologist, but our brains are amazing things, and they can change back and forth. I don't know if I'm really sort of answering your questions, but you know what, like I said, our brains change.